We are live. This is Matthew Newsom. I am an attorney with Surge Business Law, and this is January 12th live stream. As usual, every 2 weeks, we do an Ask Me Anything live stream where I answer questions submitted by clients and other followers who are out on social media. Thank you for submitting your questions. We've got quite a few today. I do want to remind you that I am not your attorney. This is information that you found on the internet, and it is general and it is generally true information. But your situation is special, and so please talk to a lawyer who understands your specific needs before using this or any legal advice that you find on the internet. It is a snow day here in blustery cold Iowa with about 10 inches of fresh snow, and so you are seeing me streaming from my home office in Ankeny, Iowa. I think there's a pretty high chance that our interview will be interrupted by a cat or some other family situation, but we will just roll with it. We've got a good stack of questions, so let's jump right in. Here's a question that was submitted to me by a client, and so we kept this information, their name, quiet. What are the differences between a commercial lease and residential leases? And this is an excellent question. In the law acknowledges that there is a difference in power and that sometimes there are people who are more powerful than others. And in a landlord-tenant situation where we're talking about a home, apartment, or rental home, the law accepts and understands that landlords typically have more financial resources and time than tenants. And so because there is a power disparity in residential leases, then the law typically gives more power to the tenant to compensate for that. So it kind of equalizes that. And so that means anytime there's a landlord-tenant dispute, if there is some ambiguity or if it's a close call, the court or the legal system will usually give the tenant the benefit of the doubt. Also, there have been many, many laws that apply to tenants in residential leases, but not so with commercial leases. In a commercial lease, the law considers a landlord and a tenant to both be savvy businesses. And that means that they either understand the law or they can afford to hire an attorney to help them understand the lease. And so the law will give a lot of deference to the contract. And so if there is a dispute between a landlord and tenant, the law is not going to take sides. It's just going to go to the contract and say, what did the contract do in this situation? So right there, that's the biggest difference between landlord tenant situations with commercial versus residential leases. However, when we see commercial leases, we also see a bigger variety in our leases. And so in a house, when you're renting a house, you probably just assume that all of the expenses for the house, except for the utilities, are included. So that means the tenant doesn't pay taxes. They don't have to pay for snow cleaning the driveway, things like that. They don't have to pay to repair the house, that the tenant just pays the rent and then their portion of the utilities. In commercial leases, that is not certain. There are some leases that are like that, and they're called gross leases. And typically these are for the lower value, the lower cost commercial leases. And it just basically means that all of the things that you would normally pay are included. More commonly, there is what we call a triple net lease, where the tenant pays a certain amount per square foot for the building that they're renting, and then they also pay a certain amount per square foot for maintenance on the building, and then they also pay a certain amount for taxes and insurance. And so these things can add up. So you might see a commercial lease that is $10 per square foot, and so you would take $10 times a number of square feet. So let's say you've got a small office with 1,000 square feet, then that would be $10,000. You divide that by 12, and that's how much your monthly rent is. Then you also have a CAM charge, and the CAM includes all of those other fees that I just mentioned. And let's say $4 per square foot. So then you would take 4 times 1,000 square feet, 4,000, divide that by 12, and then that would be added to your monthly rent. So that can be a little surprising with commercial leases. There is another kind of commercial lease. It is not quite as common as the triple net lease, But that is where the tenant pays a base rent plus maintenance charges plus a percentage of the profits that they or the revenue that they generate from their business. And this can be nice because if one of the selling points of this location is that it's going to bring a lot of business because it's in a very high volume area, then the landlord might be willing to take a chance and have a lower base rent and then make up the difference in their in by profiting by the business's success. So that is nice, and it can also be very handy for the tenant because we saw tenants, for example, in COVID era, who their business was either shut down or mostly shut down, and so because their revenue dropped, their rent payment also dropped. So that was nice. Those are the main differences between a commercial and residential lease. They obviously, because they're contract based, contracts can say whatever you want. And so we see a pretty much an infinite variety of those types of leases that we just talked about, but they typically look a little bit more like one or the other. All right, here's another question. What is the difference between a sublet and assignment for a lease? We touched on this a little bit in a previous AMA, and I think that's how this question came up. If you had an apartment when you were in college, maybe you were going to take a semester off, but you had a year-long lease. So you might find someone to take over your rent for you. In most cases, this would be a sublet because you would probably want to come back maybe for the summer or the next semester. In which case, the person who's covering for your rent just steps in and takes over for a little while. But if anything goes wrong, they don't pay their rent, or they trash the place, or the police show up, the landlord is going to come after you, the person who originally signed the lease, because it's just a sublet. And then if you need to go after the person who's subletting from you, that's your job. The landlord doesn't care. So the benefits of a sublet is it's really easy. The landlord is more likely to say yes to a sublet because they know they can still go after you if there's a problem with the tenant. But sometimes you might not want that. Maybe you just want to say, I'm going to walk away. Someone's going to take over for me. I want them to step into my shoes, and they're going to be the ones to be responsible for the future. Just get me out. That is an assignment. An assignment means all of my responsibilities, all of my benefits, I'm transferring to you, and then you get to stand in my shoes, and I'm going to just get out of the picture entirely. So that is an assignment, and assignments usually are nicer if you are not if you want to just get out. Your landlord might not like that as much, and they might say, well, not unless they can pass the tenant application and the background check and all those things. However, we use assignments for a lot more than just leases. So, for example, I deal with people who get intellectual property benefits. They get licensing fees, book royalties, things like that. And they might want to transfer that benefit onto someone else. And so that would be an assignment. So they can say, I'm going to assign this contract to that other person. When someone's buying or selling a business, we commonly do this. We assign a warranty, for example. So assignment means that the person who was in the middle is out of the picture now. The person who is taking over, they go directly between the landlord and themselves. There's no in-between person. Okay, let's do another one. Should I sign a personal guarantee for my business? And this question actually came up with the previous question related to leases. Should I sign a personal guarantee for my business lease? Was how that question was originally phrased. I changed it because I think this question is good for many, many situations, not just in leases. Imagine this. Your business is new and you're renting a new place. Well, your business has no credit history, no vendors can vouch for your business. No one knows if your business is going to be successful or if it's going to be a dud. And if you have an LLC or a corporation and your LLC signs this lease or this contract and then runs out of money, the landlord is going to try to sue the LLC and get nothing. And so what they're going to say is, hey, we've got an LLC with no history, no credit reputation, nothing like that. And we're not going to take a chance on this new business that's unproven. So in addition to the LLC being on the hook for the lease or any other contract, we also want the owner, this other party, to also be on the hook. And so if the business pays, fine, great. But if the business can't pay, now the owner has to step in and also fill the gap. And so you'll often find when you're starting a new business that if you want to get a business credit card, for example, they're not going to let the business be solely responsible. The owner is going to sign a personal guarantee. A lease, same thing. The landlord is going to want a personal guarantee for the lease. The If you need to get a truck or heavy equipment or a trailer, you have to borrow money for it. You're probably going to have to sign a personal guarantee. Now, businesses don't exactly have a credit history, a credit rating. They have a credit history, and there are some organizations that track that. But mostly, if someone's going to lend your business money, they're going to say, okay, how many years have you been in business, and um, how much money has the business made? And they're going to want tax documents, and they're going to use that as a decision if the business needs a cosigner or a personal guarantee or not. So should you do that? And the answer is, well, if you're just starting out, you kind of don't have a choice. You're pretty much going to have to. And so you have to decide if you want to take the chance or not. So we're actually going to come to a related question later on this about starting up more cheaply. So keep watching, and we'll get a add on to this answer with that next question. All right. How long should I go without paying myself? And this question is very dear to my heart. I see a lot of business owners not paying themselves, and it breaks my heart. And oftentimes the business owners say, well, as soon as we get to this milestone, then I'm going to pay myself, or as soon as we do this. Well, here's the thing. This is, in my opinion, the number one cause of burnout. And I see business owners come in all the time, and they're just weary, they're sad, they're frustrated, they're tired, and they're burned out by their business. It's taking over their life. And the reason often is because they're not paying themselves, or they're not paying themselves enough. And so I'm going to encourage you as a business owner, don't wait long to pay yourself. Um, if you created a business plan before you started your business, which I think you should have done, and if you haven't, then you should do now, then you're going to know, okay, this is how long it's going to take before I can expect profits from my business. And then when you launch your business, you'll start updating those numbers so that you know, okay, well, first month revenue, a little lower than we expected. That's usually what we see. I'm going to have to alter my projections. But let's just say that you planned your business out before starting, and you thought, well, it's going to be 6 months before I can pay myself. So then you're going to have at least 6 months money's worth of expenses in the bank so that you can afford to survive for those 6 months. And honestly, maybe you want 8 or 9 months if that's the case. So you should start paying yourself as soon as possible. And so let's say that your income, you need $6,000 a month to live off of. And so you plan 9 months. So you've got $54,000 in the bank. Well, after month two, you're starting to make a little money. Well, you know what? Start paying yourself a little bit. And that way you can stretch out your savings longer. Then in month three, your income goes up a little bit more. Okay, pay yourself a little bit more. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to see you paying yourself maybe 10% or something off the top as soon as you start making money with your business. And that way you can stretch out your savings. And then also too, as your business starts to get more and more successful, then you can increase your pay to the point where you don't have to touch your savings at all. Great book for you to read if you haven't read it. There's an audiobook and a printed book, is Profit First by Mike Michalowicz. Sorry, I'm not saying that name right. Really good book. And if you are a beginner, you can just read the first half because the book is in two parts, beginner stuff and advanced things. And the audiobook is read by the author, and he's very lively and energetic, and it makes it fun to listen to. So Profit First, you can guess maybe what the book is about. It's about owner getting profit and paying themselves right away. And it's a really good philosophy. It's what I do with my business and encourage all of the people that I have influence over to do. How can I find and hire good employees? This is one of our big risks for 2024, and it was also one of our big risks for 2023, and it was also one of our big risks for 2022. Hiring good employees is the most difficult thing. So, first of all, I want you to think carefully about your job description, and I want you to put it in writing. Put it in writing, even if this is your first employee and you're just like, I want them to do everything. So, here's the thing, you need to decide what kind of person is going to fit with my business. If you are a brand new business, then guess what? You're going to need a person who is comfortable taking chances. And that means you are probably going to hire someone who is a bit of an entrepreneur themselves. Because if they're not a risk taker, they're going to be like, yeah, I don't know. You kind of, it's, I don't know if you're going to be around or not. And so they're probably not going to leave a good paying job to go work for you in this startup that's just launched. So I want you to be realistic about what you're hiring. And now, if this is your 10th hire and you've got a pretty well-oiled machine, and you might say, well, this person, they're always going to be doing the same thing day after day. In that case, you're going to want to think, okay, I want a person who likes consistency. I had a job where it was the same thing day after day, and I hated it. I'm not good at that kind of work. I am way better at jobs with a lot of variety. I'm an entrepreneur, probably like you, and I like lots of changes in the work that I do. And so if you've got a new business, you're going to want to find someone who is an entrepreneur, and probably that person is going to like the variety, the challenge, the new things happening day to day. And then if you've got a steady business and this is your 10th or 20th employee and they've got a set job description, you're probably going to find people who like routine, and they probably also like to log off their computer at the same time each day, and maybe they've got personal obligations or family or whatever that they need to care for. And so you're more likely to find a person in that phase who is more um, consistent. So after you've written your job description, decide, am I looking for someone who likes variety and changes, or I like someone who's consistent? If you like someone who's consistent, your job description needs to speak to that person. And so you need to say, I need someone who is dependable, shows up day after day, can do the same thing again and again with quality and consistency. That's what your job description needs to communicate to them. If you need a person who can fly by the seat of their pants, who can think standing up or even running, then you need to say that, this job is going to have a lot of variety and a lot of changes. You need to be able to think on your feet and adapt. Because I found with a lot of new and smaller businesses, 20 employees or less, hiring can be very difficult because they hire the wrong kind of people. They are a business that is fraught with risk, and they try to hire people who don't like risk. Here's a downside though. If you are a new business and you're hiring an entrepreneur who's really good at adapting to risk and such, they're not going to stick around a long time unless they have that desire for variety and change fed. And what I found, having worked with many small startups, is that when a business is new and you've got 10, 20, maybe 30 or 40 employees, your job looks like this, where you have all these different hats that you're wearing. And then when your job is 500 people, it's not like that. You need specialists who just do this one thing. And so what happens is as your company succeeds, you lose your first wave of employees, which can be tricky unless you prepare for them, unless you make a plan for this, and it is possible. So that's the first thing, is you really want a good job description, and you want to make sure that you have written a job that is going to be suitable to the people that you're going to hire at your company's current phase. Now, the next thing is you're going to have to find the right kind of people. And I will say this, that if you are a new business and you're not well established, I have seen far better luck when you are hiring within your network than by using job sites. Now, that said, I can imagine a situation where you really need a certain kind of expert and you don't have that person in your network, but a friend of a friend might. So I worked for this really interesting guy. His name was Mark Shuttleworth. He was an entrepreneur in South Africa. He sold his business for, like, I don't know, $600 million or something. He went to outer space. He was the first African man in space. And then he came back to Earth. How often are you going to say that, right? He came back to Earth and started a company. And so he had been watching mailing lists for technical people where they were communicating, interacting. This was like the early days of social networks. And he had identified people who would be a good fit for his new business idea. And so he personally reached out to these people. And it's a funny story for another time, but he personally reached out to them to invite them to join his business. And so that's an example of hiring within your network. Is he looked for people who were going to be a good fit for this new business. And just to let you know that that of that first wave of people, probably half or two-thirds of them left within 5 years. And that's not saying something bad about his company, but what happened was that company grew explosively. I was employee number 41 or 2, and I left when there was 650 other employees, because the company, it just had a different spirit then. And that's what happens, and that's okay. So I would say start within your network, because it's going to be easier to find dependable people that you can count on. That said, I've seen people, and I have in the past used sites like Upwork, where you can find contractors to work for you. I have used LinkedIn to post jobs, and I've gotten good applicants from them. I've never hired anyone from a LinkedIn job. I also went to college posting billboards and posted there, and had pretty good results. And so I've hired a person that way that worked out okay. So those are also possible networks that you can tap into and could give you some opportunities. What if I have bad employees? Juliet posted this question along with several others. What if I have bad employees? And this is tough. And so let's categorize, what does bad employees mean? So bad employees could mean like really bad, like really, like they're really harming the business. And the answer to that question is you need to terminate them immediately. You need to revoke all of their access, and you need to document everything that went wrong and keep a paper record of that, or a digital record of that. But you need to end those relationships immediately. So imagine they're stealing from you, or imagine they're sabotaging your business, or imagine they're harming or exposing you to legal risk, or ruining the team, whatever. But they're causing really severe permanent damage that you need to get rid of them as quickly. And then let's just say that you've got another category of bad, and these are people who are not pulling their weight. And so sometimes we hear this term called quiet quitting. I think was kind of a 2023 trend. And these are people who've just kind of given up, and so they're coasting. But it could also be other kinds of bad behavior, people who just aren't pulling their weight, or maybe they've got some negative aspect to them. Maybe they have a bad attitude, and it just drags the team down. It hurts morale. And so this category of bad, I would strongly suggest starting with a write-up process. Meet with them and just say, listen, here's some behavior or actions that you are doing that are not acceptable for this company. I would steer away from expressing opinions or editorializing. I would say be very fact-based. For example, your job requires that you clock in while you're in the office. It has to be no later than 7:30 a.m. And we have seen from records that you are clocking in from your home at 7:30 a.m. and then driving to the office. So that is unacceptable behavior, and it needs to change right away. And we will not warn you again if you continue to do this behavior. So that's an example of being abstract. I'm sorry, being concrete, not abstract. Some abstract behavior or a way to describe something in an abstract way that is not as good is, yeah, I'm calling you into the office because you're really depressing. You're hurting the morale of the team. So this is very difficult for a person to correct, because they're probably not sure how to fix it. And so, I would suggest in this case you say, on our internal discussion board, you made these statements, and these were understood by the other people on the team as being very discouraging, very negative, and it's hurting morale. And so what we're going to do is ask you to not make comments like this. I like you to look at the bright side. I like you to be positive. If you don't like your job, then look for another one. But I want you to be concrete, because if you say it in a way that it's very clear what the bad behavior is, then they can correct that behavior. And so that's what you want to do, is you want to write them up. And then by doing it, by having very concrete, clear steps on things that they need to change, if they don't, then it's a simple checkbox later on. Okay, remember a week ago when we said, please don't do this and you must do this? well, you haven't, right? So we're putting this in your file. We are going to terminate you, hand over your keys, whatever. So uh, in all of these cases, I'm going to encourage you to document this whole process. All right, there's one more category of bad employees, and this is bad with quotes. And we are talking about average employees. And every company wants to have like these exceptional rock star employees who really just hit home runs. And you know what? You can't have that all of the time. If you can have one, consider yourself lucky. Um, but there's also average employees, and sometimes they're good and sometimes they're not good, and they just kind of hover back and forth. And so what I'm going to suggest in this case is that these are not behaviors that I would say normally need to be written up and documented, but instead I want you to have a process for setting goals for your team and that set clear standards and then are achievable. I'm a big fan of doing goal setting on 13-week increments where you set goals for your company and team. And so your goals might be, okay, we're going to go 13 weeks and we're going to have 0 safety incidents or something like that. We're going to have 13 weeks and we're going to, have a sales goal of this. And your job in customer support is going to be this, and your job in billing is going to be this, but we want to see these numbers here. And so setting these goals, because what happens then is, first of all, your team will clearly understand the difference between okay and great. And then second of all, if you see people who are just constantly, just barely squeaking by, then you can do what's called a performance improvement plan. And I'm going to ask you to do a little bit of your own research in this because I don't want this to go on for a long time. But if you're interested, leave a comment and let me know, and I can create a video just on performance improvement plans. But a performance improvement plan says, okay, here's what we see from your behavior. We set these goals and you're just barely making it, and and we need to get this level up. So you're going to meet with me once a week, and we're going to look and see how you're doing on these goals. And by doing a performance improvement plan, you set a start date and an end date. And if the performance doesn't improve, then you say, okay, we're going to dismiss you. And so that's a little bit less bad behavior, but employees who are just really only okay and just barely getting by, they can be a management chore. And for young businesses and small businesses, that extra management resource that you have to put into keeping track of just okay employees can be quite burdensome, and it can mean that these employees are costing your business opportunity. So that's what I would do. All right. Uh, in all of these cases, we're going to use we're going to use concrete written expectations and disciplinary actions so that if you ever do have a problem, then you'll know why things happen the way they did. And if you get some kind of a dispute, wage claim or unemployment dispute, then you can say, here's what happened and here's why. So I hope that was helpful. And leading right off of the last question, Julia also asked, what do we do if we get an unemployment benefit claim or wage dispute? And so if you've got an employee who was behaving poorly, then you have hopefully a paper trail, either electronic or printed, that says, okay, here's our expectations, here was the employee's behavior, here's what we did to try to coach the employee up, and all of our efforts failed, or maybe in the extreme case, the employee was stealing from the company or whatever. And so usually when we see wage disputes, it goes with a termination that they say was wrongful. When we see unemployment benefit claims, there's really two kinds. If companies lay off employees that were really fine, but they just couldn't afford them anymore, then unemployment will kick in and you're going to have to pay it. But if you let go people for cause, then you don't have to keep paying them when you let them go. But you're going to need a paper trail. But in each of these situations, what happens is the terminated employee makes a dispute with the regulatory agency, and it is an agency. It is not like the lawyer is not the police or anything like that. And the agency will ask them to fill out a form and provide details. Maybe there'll be a letter, maybe there'll be a spreadsheet or something like that. And they'll send it to you, the business owner, and say, okay, you've got a dispute. Here's what they're saying. And then you have to reply. And they don't usually give you a ton of time to reply. And so, first of all, I want you to know that you can call me. You should call me because I see a lot of people goof these up. And it is not necessary to call me, but it is a good idea to call me. And then what happens is I will ask you to go through the process. I want to know all of the situation. I want to know the history. I want to see what things you have documented. If there was stuff that happened that wasn't documented, I want you to document it now. If he mouthed off to his manager, get the manager to write a letter saying this is what happened. And then what we're going to do is we're going to fill out this form that the agency gave us, make a letter, because they give you like this teeny tiny little box to write the details in. Don't do it. Just say see attached. Write a letter, and then we're going to be thorough. And by letting me review and help you write that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take your brain dump and I'm going to refine it. I'm going to delete out things that could be unclear or that might make you look bad. I'm going to make sure that it's very factual, and we're not going to lie. That's absolutely not a good idea. We're not going to lie, but oftentimes I'll see people blab on and they just say too much, and that looks bad. So we'll trim it up. We'll make it professional. We'll make it clear. Sometimes people will say, "Well, he did this," but then it's not clear. Who was he? Was he the manager? Was he the employee? Who was that? And so we'll just clean it up for you. Then we send it back. Oftentimes we see that these things work out in the employer's behavior. Here's when they work out in your behavior: when you've got good documentation, um, saying here's what went wrong, here's what we tried to do to fix it, here's what happened when we tried, we terminated them for this reason. Those tend to work out well. Wage claim disputes are a little bit different. Wage claim disputes are very serious in Iowa. Iowa and many other states will put a heavy penalty on the employer for withholding wages. And so you do want to take wage claim disputes very seriously. You should call me for those or another attorney. Wage claim disputes are a big deal, but the process is the same. All right, let's move on. How do I start a business remotely? And is this a good idea for saving on startup expenses? So first of all, let me just say this. Is it a good idea to save on startup expenses? Yes, it is a good idea to save on startup expenses. Please save money on startup expenses. A lot of businesses fail because they spend too much money. You're going to start a construction business. You need a backhoe. Okay, good. Can you rent it? Rent it. Don't buy it. Wait until your income can justify it. Even if you see an amazing deal, rent it. Don't buy it. Maybe if you see a really good deal, you should buy it, because then you could sell it if the business fails. But businesses need cash to keep going. So yes, keep your startup expenses low. Well, how do I start up a business remotely? And so just remember, this is especially out to my libertarian friends watching this. You do not need to get permission from the government to start a business. You might need permission to collect sales tax and certain other kinds of taxes, but you don't need to ask for permission to start a business. However, filing for an LLC or a corporation is a good idea because it gives you limited liability, so that if something goes wrong with your business and you get sued, then your LLC or corporation protects you, the owner, from getting personally harmed by that lawsuit. So an LLC or corporation is a good idea. I have a very good deal for businesses who want to start a business. So if you go to Surge Business Law website, you can see that we have a package. It's $250 per month for 5 months. That lets us create your business, give you all of the documentation and records you need, and then also 5 months of coaching to help your business get off the ground. It's an extremely popular solution, so that's a way to do it. But however you do it, if you register an LLC or corporation, that's good. Now, what kind of business are you going to do? Are you going to do a personal service business like home remodeling or something like that, and you're going to use your home as a home base? Okay, good. You're going to need the kinds of insurance typical for your business. Are you starting an online shop? Well, that's pretty basic. You're going to want to have a privacy policy, terms of service, a website, those kinds of things. And so you're going to just want the ability to do that. You might need to file for sales tax exemption or sales tax certificate so you can collect sales tax. I would suggest having an accountant do it for you, because the laws are always changing on those things, and having an expert who's keeping track of those changes will be very helpful. But you can DIY these things too. And so then, one of the things you're going to want to decide is, do you want your business address to be your home address. And if you have an LLC or corporation, you must have an address that is publicly displayed that the world can use to contact you for legal questions and other things. And so if you've got a home-based business, you might not want your home address to be listed, in which case you're going to want a virtual office or something like that. And by the way, my subscription includes privacy for your business, so that's another perk of using my subscription. Um, if you have an office space or whatever, cool, but that's not really a remote business. How are you going to meet with customers? Are they going to be in your house? Or is it going to be remote? Or are you going to have a shared office space that you go to? There are companies like Regus. There's companies like Bluebeam if you're in the Des Moines area, or Gravitate, where you can rent office space and use it for a few hours a month. It's excellent if you need meeting rooms for small meetings. And so that way you can meet there. That's a real handy way to do it. But honestly, you're going to want to keep your costs low. And so I do think that having a remote business is a good idea. But I do want you to think about one maybe not so obvious question, and that is, how are people going to find your business? And oftentimes, a main way that people find your business is by going to Google and searching, or Apple Maps, or Bing, or one of these other tools, but Google usually. And Google and Apple and Bing, they put high preference on businesses that have an address on the map. And so one of the things that you can do, and you should strongly consider, is an office that you can list on Google Maps. So when I launched my law firm, I rented a room from another attorney. He had a spare office space, and I rented space from him. And I worked there for 2 years. And this gave me a huge SEO advantage, because when people searched for a lawyer, they would see me on the map. And this was really good because so my office is in Ankeny, Iowa, or was at least. And so I would show up usually number one in the list when people searched for lawyers in Ankeny, Iowa. And that was a big help. Well, if you don't have a location that you can put on the map, then you're not going to show up in quite as many places. And so having some kind of a virtual office will be a good thing. The only problem is Google Maps doesn't like virtual offices, and so you have to be a little bit sneaky. And so you'll see that some virtual offices will say Suite B2 or something like that. And so they might have a receptionist. Regus, for example, does it this way. And so those tend to work better. So having a virtual business is a fine idea. Many of my clients are virtual remote businesses, and um, uh, and sorry, just a little notification pop up. Are virtual businesses and have home-based businesses and work fully remotely. All right, let's move to the next one. How to save money when starting a business. There's a lot of ways, but first of all is I want you to keep track of your expenses. So get a spreadsheet. If you've got a business plan, that's a great place to start. But I want you to just keep track of all the money that you're spending. And I want you to just really set yourself a budget. And so when I started out my business, I rented an office from somebody else. It was very, very affordable. And so start with what's the cheapest way that I can get this done. Do you need a website? And for some businesses, the answer is, if I don't have a really amazing website, I'm going to get nothing. But a lot of businesses, a really basic web presence is fine. And so, for example, if you set up a profile on Google, Google will give you an option to create a really simple website for free. There's also very affordable services. You can just use Linktree, for example, and you can put your contact info on there. And so if your business needs basic website services, that's fine. A lot of people can get by with just a short, simple, single web page. Maybe you use software that lets you handle customers. Like a lot of restaurants will use software that lets you put your menu online. That might be the only website you need for the first year or two of your business. And the benefit is people can make orders online, and you can connect it to Grubhub or Uber Eats or whatever. So see if the software that you use for running your business will let you make a simple website in there. Um, I would say marketing is one of those things that people will oftentimes overspend on at the beginning. And I don't get me wrong, I think that marketing is essential. It's a very, very important expense. But what a lot of people don't think about is okay, what am I getting with this marketing money? And and therefore they spend money on things that don't work. Number one thing is I see people will spend like $2,000 on SEO. This is not a good use of your money in 99% of businesses. Uh, you can get a website relatively affordably. And if you are just launching, a simple website or, a professionally done but small number of page website is going to go well. And then using all of the free tools, get on Google, get on Bing, get on Yahoo, get on Apple Connect, get on Yelp, get on all these things, and then you'll get some SEO for essentially free. You don't need to spend hundreds or thousands of dollars on SEO at first. Because oftentimes we see new businesses, they don't really have it all figured out as far as what their business is going to do. A lot of times, the first month or two or three is is experiments. People just trying to figure out, okay, what is it that people want from my business? And if you spend a lot of money on marketing up front, you might realize, oh, dang, I got to redo that all. So be careful on spending for marketing. Buying equipment. A lot of times, you probably need a computer. Okay, do you need a brand new computer? Can you get by with that one that you've had for a little while? Do you need a truck or a vehicle? Okay, do you need a brand new vehicle? Do you need a lease? Or can you get by with the one that you have? If you're using your own vehicle, then make sure your insurance agent knows so that you don't find that you don't have insurance coverage if you're using it for work. What about tools? If you are in construction, you you need tools, and you kind of have to have good ones. So that is what it is. But do you need every tool, or can you get by with spending good money on a few tools and then use cheaper versions of the less common stuff? A lot of people overspend things like this. Do I need a trailer? Do I need heavy equipment? I would say see if you can rent these things for the first year. Once your business takes off, then you can look for deals where you can buy these things. But I'm going to just urge you not to spend too much money. So keep your costs low. Don't spend indiscriminately. And I want you to remember these three letters: ROI. ROI stands for return on investment. If I spend $100 on tools, I should be able to get 1,000 or $10,000 worth of value from those. And like I see a lot of people, they spend on marketing and they don't have any clue if it's working. And so when you're spending money on things, I want you to be able to track, okay, what is the benefit I'm getting from this spend? You do that and you will probably be okay, better than average for sure. All right, let's move on. Should I use an attorney to set up an LLC in the state I live in or where the real estate will be? So this is Johanna who sent this question in, and she is asking specifically about LLCs for real estate, like rental properties or commercial real estate. And the answer is um, you should probably have an attorney in the state. Well, this is a tough one. I can roll the dice and I can answer both ways. So let me just zoom out for a second. If you have real estate in one state, so let's say that you live in Iowa and you have real estate in Nebraska. If you get sued over your real estate in Nebraska, I guarantee you that court case is going to be in Nebraska. So you are eventually going to need an attorney in Nebraska. When we set up businesses for people, we typically will set up a LLC in their home state, or if their home state is bad for LLCs, then in a state like Iowa or Wyoming. And then we also set up an LLC in each state where they own real estate. Now, some states, the LLC laws are very standard. So there is a set of laws called the Uniform Limited Liability Code. And so if they're in a uniform state, then you would find that attorneys who are familiar with the uniform code for limited liability companies are going to be comfortable with all of those states. But if you're in a state that doesn't have the uniform code, or your attorney's in a state that doesn't have it and you've got property in a state that does, you're really going to want an attorney in that state. And so I will say this, that I have done it both ways, and I have, in fact, just today, I referred a client to an attorney in another state to help them because they were starting to ask questions that were not simple questions that could be abstracted to generally true across the country. It was questions very specific to a state that was not Iowa. And I said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to set you up with an attorney in that state. So I would say that, first of all, you should have an attorney somewhere. And then if your attorney is competent to help you make decisions about that other state's laws, then I would say it's probably okay. But that attorney is probably going to say, well, I'm okay with this, but I'm not okay with that. And they might give you other advice. But I would suggest starting with an attorney in the state where you are first, and then use that as your home base. And so I guess what we would call that is, in the legal world, we call it your nexus. And so if you are a Minnesota-based real estate investor, your nexus is Minnesota, and then maybe you're buying property in Minnesota, Iowa, and Arkansas. And so you might end up having attorneys helping your Minnesota attorney in Iowa and in Arkansas. That would be a common way to do it. But I would start with an attorney in your state and then listen to their advice. All right, I hope that was helpful. Let's move on. Do I need an LLC before I purchase my first rental property? This is from Johanna again. And so I'm going to say this, that it is not a bad idea, especially if you have plans to grow, but it is not necessary. If you have only one thing to protect yourself in your real estate business, if you got one property and you can say, well, I can either do an LLC, or that thing that you should do, if you can only do one thing, is you can have good insurance. Good insurance will give you protection for the vast majority of things. If you can do two things, good insurance and an LLC is a good plan. If you're like, well, I think I'm just going to have one, and I don't know if I'm going to have more or not. Commonly, for example, we'll see people who inherit their parents' house and they decide to keep it and rent it out. You've got a relatively low risk exposure, and so having good insurance is going to give you a pretty significant amount of risk protection, and that is what you should do. But if you say, this is the beginning of my empire, I see a lot of people, they come to me with this hodgepodge of different things that they've done, and I wish that we could have started it out right. And so the way that we would start out a business, an LLC, for real estate, is set up a holding company. And so if you know you're going to be building a big portfolio, I would say go ahead and do the LLC and talk to an attorney to set it up right, so that you've got a good structure that's going to give you liability protection, charging order protection, and the best tax situation as possible. Thanks for the question, Johanna. If I purchase a rental property in my name, how do I move it into an LLC? And the short answer is that you will typically quit claim the property into the business. A quit claim is a kind of deed that is very simple, and it gives no promises. It just says, hey, if I've got a right, I'm going to transfer my right to you, to the LLC. And so it does not give any guarantees or warranties. And so what will happen is sometimes we will say, well, you quit claim the property into this LLC or trust, and now you're selling it. We might have to quit claim it back out of the LLC or trust into your name in order to complete the sale. But normally what we will do is we will simply quit claim the property into the LLC. And you might be afraid that you have to worry that, oh, the bank might call my loan due. If it's a low down payment loan, that almost never happens. If it's a conventional loan, it technically can happen, but it's very, very rare, absent some other special circumstance. And so typically we do not see this being a problem, and we're okay with quit claiming it in. But if you have a conventional loan, it is possible that the bank will say, hey, something just changed. You're going to have to pay that loan off. And if you've got a loan that's like 3% from 2020 or 2019, and now rates are 6%, the bank might use that as an excuse. Again, for low down payment loans, this isn't a problem, but for conventional loans, it is technically possible. But usually if you keep paying the mortgage, they're not going to care. And so they don't care if the LLC's got the deed or not. Let's go next. How do I know when I should get a will? And this was asked by someone who wanted to be anonymous. I'll say this, that if you are young and you have very few assets, your risk exposure for something going wrong by not having a will is pretty low. Once you've got dependents, people like children or people who depend on you. Once you've got starting to get significant assets, and so you've got a net worth that's greater than zero, maybe greater than $50,000, then it's probably start time to start thinking about it. If you have, for example, a 401k, and you don't know who you're gonna you don't know who's gonna get it when you're dead, and it's more than say $50,000, that's enough for it to go through probate. 401ks are kind of a bad example because usually you appoint a beneficiary, but let's just say that you bought a house and then the house goes up in value and now you've got $50,000 in equity. Well, you know what? It would make your life easier. It would make the lives of your other people easier when you're gone if you have a will. If you have kids, it kind of becomes a bigger deal. If you are a single parent, it's actually a pretty big deal at this point. You're going to want a will. So I would say the moment you start to get assets or people depending on you, that's when it's a good idea to get a will. If there is a pretty good chance that there's going to be an argument when you are dead, you should have a will, because that way you can make it clear, this is what I want, and you can stop the arguing. What should I consider when naming an LLC? Um, First of all, if you have an LLC, each state has a law that defines what the name must contain, and usually the last part needs to have a certain bit to it. So in Iowa, for example, it needs to end with the words limited liability company, LLC, or limited company. It can't end in company because that would be a corporation. And so that's usually the number one thing, is you have to make sure it ends with the proper phrase. Second of all, you have to decide, do you want it to be easy to spell, remember, and pronounce? If so, then you should choose a name that's easy to remember, spell, and pronounce. So when I launched my business, it was Iowa Business Lawyer. And that is a very easy name to spell and pronounce and remember. My last name is Nuzum, Nuzum, and people very frequently misspell it or misspeak it. And so I did not want my law firm to be called Nuzum Law Firm or something like that. And so I deliberately chose not to use that as my business name. Another thing is, it's got to be distinct from other businesses, and the law has a pretty low concern about how distinct it is. And so that if you just change one letter, then you can come up with a name if the name you want is taken. But you should also consider making sure that there's no likelihood of confusion, and that when other people um, see your business name, they don't think it's some other business, because that can get you into trouble with trademarks. And so look for something that kind of is unique. But I think that Johanna, since she asked a question about real estate, she might be thinking about what should you name an LLC for real estate. We will oftentimes see people use holdings or enterprises or investments or something like that in their name. And that just makes it clear that this is a business that is simply holding property. However, that also can make you a target, because someone might say, oh, Johanna's Investments LLC. That sounds like it's probably worth a lot of money. Maybe we'll sue them. So, that's one possibility. But I would say make sure that it's distinct, make sure that it complies with the law of the state, and then also think carefully about how easy it is to spell and pronounce and say. How can I increase my price without losing customers? So I was talking with Stephanie on the phone and she asked me this question. I said, do you mind if I add it to the list? She says, yeah, go ahead. I said, do you want me to list your name? And she says, please do. This is Stephanie with Birchwood Environmental. And so they do environmental inspections and compliance for real estate. And this is a tough question. And so first of all, I want you to be sensitive to your customers, and everything has gotten more expensive. But at the same time too, I want you to pay yourself. I mentioned this earlier in the live stream. I want owners to get paid. You deserve to get paid for the work that you're doing, and you deserve to get paid a fair rate. And also too, I want you to look at the perceived value. If someone says, hey, I'm going to use your services and I'm going to make $100,000 from those services, well, then that might be worth a little bit more to someone who says, well, I'm going to use your services, I'm going to make $1,000. And so you deserve to get paid based upon the value that you provide. But that doesn't answer the question on how. And so first of all, I would start by making sure that you give plenty of communication. And so if you've got people who have been thinking about hiring you, and maybe you've met with them and sent them proposals, then I would first of all contact them and say, I want to let you know that our prices are going up, and give them a date. And that way it encourages them to either make a decision now, or to understand that the pricing that they were given is not going to last forever. Then you've got existing customers who might be paying you. And so give them notice too. Say, I want you to know that as a valued customer, I'm giving you advanced warning of the rates going up. And figure out a reasonable amount of time. For some businesses, 2 weeks might be plenty of time. For some businesses, 8 or 9 months might be more reasonable. But I would give them time. And then also too, what I would do is I would promptly start advertising your new rates to any new customers who are using your services. Uh, so, um, so that's how I would do it. Now, I want you to think carefully about how much your rates should go up. And so, in the last 18 months or so, inflation has driven up prices on average about 10%, maybe a little bit more than that, and in some areas more. So, I want you to just remember that your employees need to get paid more because their costs have gone up. And so if you want to keep good employees, you need to pay them competitively. And that's usually a business's biggest expense. And so you need to make sure that you're charging enough that you can pay enough. And then likewise, your costs have gone up and such. So I want you to have a healthy profit margin. For most businesses, this is somewhere between 30 and 60% gross margin. And ideally for smaller businesses, closer to that 50% or higher. And so your rate increase should get you to a healthy profit margin. Regarding the filing of BOI, if we have a parent and child LLC, do we file one for each? And this is Mario. And the answer is it depends on how you are structuring your business. And so you are probably going to have to file the beneficial owner information for all of your parent and child LLCs. Depending on how you've structured it, there's going to be different ways of filing it. And so I want you to just know right now that I will be doing an announcement later on in January with helping businesses understand how to be compliant. Right now, everyone is still uncertain about how to be compliant with BOI. The government gave us rules before 2024, but they didn't give us the forms that we were going to have to fill out until January 1st. And so on January 1st, we got, okay, here's the form that you need. I'll just tell you, these are not clear. The average time it takes to fill these forms out is, I'm hearing something like 45 minutes. And they're onerous. So you are probably going to want to get help. And so unless your business is brand new, launching in 2024, you do have some time to wait. And so I'm going to encourage you to wait for filing the beneficial owner information. If you are not subscribed, visit Surge Business Law's website and get on our mailing list, or follow us on social media, including YouTube, wherever you're watching this, so that you see the announcement when we publish it. But we're going to publish clear information on how to be compliant and what services we're going to offer businesses to make it easy so that you don't have to DIY it. But yes, you are probably going to have to file this information for the parent and the child if you have a holding company structure for your businesses. I just want to remind you that you can subscribe. Please, I just said it, subscribe to YouTube or Facebook or LinkedIn or wherever you're watching this video so that you get to see our future announcements. And I usually send out an announcement ahead of time saying, I'm looking for questions. Please submit your questions. You don't have to wait. You can do that now. But then also too, when we do the live stream and we publish the individual videos, I'd love for you to watch them. Thank you so much for participating in the live stream, and we'll see you again in 2 weeks.